We will start with this IDEA 3G diversity breakfast, and it's my great pleasure now to ask our president, Kay Mowry, to give you some welcome remarks. Kay, please.
Hi, good morning and welcome to the spring meetings. It's great to see all of you. Thanks for coming to Paris. We are getting very excited for the meetings here as we get ready for Milan, which really, and we'll talk a little bit about numbers later in the spring meetings, but it's been incredible so far, the response for Milan, and we're very excited, and we think we're gonna shatter some records this year. But I won't give you numbers just yet. A little bit of a teaser this morning, but let's kick off here with the IDEA breakfast, international platform for diversity and equality in astronautics. It's a tough one. I asked these guys earlier this morning, and we were all looking at each other. What is the I for inclusion, internet? Yeah, anyways. Thank you for coming. Look, the next generation is critical to the future of the IAF. And we see more and more at all of our events that we're getting close to half. And in the case of Baku, we had 56% of our attendees, delegates registered for the IC, that were under the age of 35, which is really an amazing figure if you think about it. And it bodes well for the future of the Federation, for our committee structure, and for everything we're doing. Because when you can get people to come when they're younger, they tend to come for the rest of their careers. So this is amazing, and I know the organizers in Baku, Rana's here, and it was an amazing showing from young people. We had an incredible amount of enthusiasm there, and it turned out into a lot of abstracts, right, submitted for Milan. I think number 5 on the list of abstracts was coming out of Baku, out of Azerbaijan, and this really shows you the importance of what we're doing here to get more involvement in the space sector and the excitement going forward. So the panel we're going to have now focuses on intergenerational exchanges within the IAF, exploring how the younger generation perceives their roles within the Federation itself, with opportunities, obstacles, and ways in which the older members can contribute and their support towards inclusion. So without further ado, we get the first panel kicked off. Thank you.
Thank you, Kay. Yes, in the last years, we've always focused on different aspects of the 3G, and we've decided this year to focus on the G for generation. And, you know, the Federation has kind of, I think, a very good track record, as Kay has mentioned already, with more than 50% of the young generation participating in our IECs. But also within our committees, we've made great progress. I just want to mention that 2 of our 11 vice presidents are young professionals, actually. You will meet them later. You know them, Davide and Mishaal, who will be on the panel as well. And the Bureau has taken already also very important decisions, and that is living up to, or let the IAF live up to, an exemplary organization in generational diversity, by deciding that the Young Generation Committee should be chaired also by a young person, by a young generation representative. So without further ado, I would like to introduce the next panel now, and the title is a bit provocative to say, is the next generation ready to take up leadership? But also the subtitle says it is the senior generation ready to pass on the torch. And in order to dive into this, it is my great pleasure to introduce the Vice President for Diversity Initiatives, Mishaal ASHEMIMRY, who will be the moderator of this exciting panel. Mishaal, please.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for being here. We're excited to have this provocative conversation this morning. So as Christian mentioned, so is the young generation ready to take up leadership roles, and are the seniors willing to let go and allow them to flourish? So over the year, we have noticed a constant increase in participation of the next generation in the IAF, events and activities. However, this participation is often a more passive participation. Do you feel that this is due more to the next generation's reticence to claim more active roles, or to the resistance of the existing structure?
Good morning, everybody. My name is Matias Campos. I am the chair of the Latin American and Caribbean subcommittee here at the IAF. I'm also the vice chair of the Access Committee, which was rebranded recently. It stands for Administrative Committee for Connecting Emerging Space Ecosystems. Happy to be here representing both not gender, but generation and.
But you do represent gender, technically, male gender.
Yeah, true. Yeah, but the other two Gs, my colleagues in the company, they do represent all three. But it's generation and geography here as well. Thank you.
My name's Dr. Annie Hanma. I'm from Australia, Sydney to be precise, University of Sydney. So I'm the IPC co-chair for IAC 2024 Milan and 2025 Sydney. So I'm here representing, I suppose, all of the three Gs, because I can attest to the distance of Australia, but it is well worth a visit. So I'm sure you'll all want to come and visit us there next year.
Thanks. Morning, everyone. My name is Nicole, and I'm currently the Executive Director of the Space Generation Advisory Council, also originally from Bulgaria, so I guess also representing all three Gs. And I guess as somebody who represents the voice of the young generation, it's particularly important for us to be on this panel and really dive into this topic, which for us is very dear.
Morning, everyone. My name is Michal Brichta. My day job is that I lead the industry branch of Slovak Space Office, and here within the IAF family, I chair the Europe subcommittee, and as of autumn last year, I'm also one of the vice presidents. So. Good to see you all again in Paris.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Ken Davidian. I'm the VP of North American Operations for the International Space University. I guess I represent all three Gs as well, just in a different way. And yeah, I'm a member of the Entrepreneurship and Investment Committee and also the Honors and Awards Committee.
So getting back to your question, Mishaal, first I wanted to point out that the title of the talk is The Next Generation Ready? And I think we are. And actually we're already taking up leadership roles. As Mishaal mentioned, he's part of the BPs, Nicole, Executive Director of SGAC, myself leading the Access Initiative and the Latin American Subcommittee. So it's not only about are we ready or not, is that realizing that we are already on those positions, and I think that it's bringing some great fresh air into the Federation, and I think it's more and more important for young professionals around the world to come to IACs and see that there's a path of growth for their careers. And the other part of maybe the more provocative one is the later generation ready to let go, not let go, but to welcome us into the leadership roles. I think it is, because it's been very, at least in Access, it's been very organic. We've been working very closely with the IAF, with the Secretariat, with the Bureau as well, with the other leadership in Access, and we've made a great team. It's not being like, okay, we need someone to represent young people, so we select you and you. No, it's been very organic. Like who's ready to lead this team? Okay, you are young, you are not. It's not part of it. You are professionally ready to be part of it, to take this project into the next phase, and that's what's been happening. And very happy to say that it's growing. Also, it's very important. Just from my personal perspective, one of the first opportunities I had to be part of a leadership role in the IAF was when we hosted the Global Conference on Space for Emerging Countries in Quito. So this was in 2022. At the time, my colleagues and myself were I'd like to say that the average age of the hosts was around 25 years old. So maybe that's something that when a lot of you were in Quito, you didn't realize that the organizers were so young, because we were able to produce a very high quality conference that I think everybody took some good memories, and of course has created a long lasting legacy for the Federation as we see Access taking shape and some other activities going forward with future legs incoming. So that's my take on this, and thank you.
I guess I go next. Okay, so I think, well, everything that has been said is so accurate. And but one thing I might draw attention to is in the question, the kind of, is it to do with reticence to claim a role or resistance of a structure? I think it can be both, because I think there is respect that younger people have for people who come before and the people that we look up to, and those people are in these roles. And so in order to claim that role, we have to push someone who's doing a good job out of that role on the assumption that maybe we could also do a good job. That's a very hard thing for a young person who has the proper respect for their colleagues and for people in the industry that they look up to worldwide to do. And so for that reason, I think there has to be a kind of acknowledgement of that, and those structural changes are very important. So when structures are changed and we say, okay, you can only hold this role for a certain number of years, or we insist that there be a certain number of young people represented across all of these roles, not just in the roles that are marked out for young people, then I think you start to see change. Because instead of feeling like instead of young people feeling like they're treading on toes and having to step in and push people out of the way, which they're probably just not going to want to do. And if someone does want to do that, well, maybe they're not the right person to lead in what is essentially a service sort of position. So when those opportunities are created within structures, I think that's when you see young people coming to their full potential and being able to work collaboratively with more experienced people. In my experience being IPC co-chair, I am so grateful for the experience of Michelle and of the whole IAF team and of my co-chair Alfonso in welcoming me and also helping me in that journey of, here are the things you might not know, let me teach you those things and let's work together on this. But never, ever has there been a question of, should you be in this role? And I think that that's the best approach, because it combines learning and working together, and that feeling of collaboration and passing on knowledge to the next generation, with also giving space for me to grow into that role. So I think that it does work very well, and it works very well because people are so generous with their time.
Yeah, I would absolutely agree with everything that's being said. I think one thing I want to add is that often the problem is not that the young generation is passive. I mean, currently SJAC is almost reaching 30,000 members, and among these people we have extremely, extremely active, smart people who are doing amazing things in space. And I would not define them as passive. I think they more so don't have the opportunity to get involved in different structures and different platforms. So I would definitely say that we need to have a better structure in place to allow opportunities for young professionals to get involved. And another thing that I think is also important is that often as a young professional, you don't have the confidence to perhaps join a certain committee or, make your voice be heard. And I think without encouraging this, ultimately we're not going to achieve the goal of having everybody's voice being heard. So I think one important factor is having that encouragement and really pushing for young professionals and the young generation to be more involved. And if we don't create these opportunities, ultimately we're not going to have their involvement.
Yeah, so the question was posed, young generation is being more and more involved, but in more passive way. I will now do maybe what we often hear that the young generation is best in. I will disagree. No, because now seriously, I think that what I could see in the space community, of course, coming as a new one is not always easy, but this is not just for the generation. For example, from countries which are not like the main space players, smaller countries, we see very similar situation where when we come as a newcomers to well-established ecosystem, we have to bring something new, some added value which has demand for. And I think this is the very same with every newcomer, whether it's for the generation, whether it's for geography, etc. So exactly what Matthias mentioned, there are so many good examples, like Access, like the Bureau here in IAF, where we see that there is a good possibility for young people to take up leadership roles. It's important also for them to look on how to be bringing some added value, how to be bringing some, not just new ideas, but ideas which I have demand for. So when I look at space community, I see really many people that are trying their best to have mutual respect, intergenerational respect, the older generation representatives with tremendous experience to doing their best to pass the torch, and the young generation professionals trying to come up with some ideas that can contribute to the future growth of the ecosystem.
Perfect. Okay, so I took a broader view of this thing because I think the IAF is doing a great job of bringing the younger generation in, allowing new ideas, and giving them positions of power. I remember 40 years ago when I was like 25, just starting my job, and we had all our managers at NASA. I was at NASA Lewis at the time in Cleveland. Everybody was like so old, they're like 45 or something, right? And we said, oh, in 5 years, 6 years, or they probably were 50. In 5 years, they're going to retire, and we're going to take over, and we're going to change the world. And of course, nothing happened for 20 years, right? And so looking at the broader industry, I think it's really tough for younger people to break in and to get leadership positions. You start thinking about what are the qualities that you need for this, and this is where I'll pull out the quote from a former U.S. president, Teddy Roosevelt. He had a lot of different jobs, and he succeeded in all of them, and he was young, and what he decided was that to succeed, you don't need any type of administrative genius or even unusual qualities, but just common sense, common honesty, energy, resolution, and readiness to learn. And I think that's a good set of qualities to have because nobody can know everything. And with the proper set of mentorship, I think everybody could succeed to some level, and I think it's giving folks opportunity and then being enthusiastic. Well, Mark Twain said, of course, what you need to succeed, of course, is ignorance and confidence. And this, I think, was highlighted by last week at the satellite conference. Carissa Christensen stood up at the SGX event. And it was interesting. She used the word entitlement. She said that if she knows what she knew now, she would have felt more entitled to grab opportunities and to not feel like she needed permission. It's like the French saying that says, liberties are not given, they're taken. And this is sort of you need to have that sense of entitlement, I think. But to recognize the fact that this panel title was basically clickbait, right? We need to recognize that what we're talking about here now is power. And there are many different types of power, and there's a financial system in place that keeps people wanting to maintain their position. To allow a younger person to take over a program management position or to take over a supervisory position, it's a power struggle thing now. And there are many forms of power, and it's a very complex thing. So getting the entire industry to allow the younger generation to come up to continue carrying the torch, I think, is going to be very, very difficult.
Ken, I had a question for you. You're absolutely right. I think I agree with you. But one thing I would like to point out is for certain roles, like especially technical roles, where the experience comes with time, how do you bridge that gap with the younger generation attempting to take on these very technical, heavily requiring experience roles? Is it through like a mentorship program where the younger person has to be under the tutelage of a more experienced technical person for a while before they can take on this leadership role? Or how do you see it?
I remember I had a guy, Phil Masters, that I was assigned to when I started. And there's so much in terms of working and job experience that's tacit, right? It's not going to be something you can read in a book or learn. You've got to do it through experience, or you've got to do it by following somebody around. And a lot of organizations are set up to do that, some better than others. I think COVID really screwed a lot of the younger generation. I mean, there's a feeling right now, at least in the United States, that they really want to telework and they don't want to give up the convenience of being at home and work-life balance. And I think that people are really getting shortchanged in their careers by not going in and not having that mentorship opportunity, because sitting in front in your office and Zooming everywhere is not really doing it. So I mean, I'm encouraging folks that I'm mentoring to say, listen, if you've got a job opportunity that's within a half an hour of your house, you tell your employer you want to be in there 5 days a week, because Adobe has already told their employees that if you're not in person in the office, you're not going to get considered for promotion. And that's going to be the implicit, if not, the tacit assumption of a lot of managers. So you've got to do this work-life balance, but it's got to be balanced toward the work, at least in the early parts of your career. Make that sacrifice, because it's an investment in yourself. So to be mentored, you have to be with the mentor, kind of thing.
All right, so my next question is essentially what you touched upon, Nicole, which is whether essentially the younger generation should be welcomed, or should it be proactively encouraged to be part of the community? So what do you feel? Should it just be welcomed, or should we make an effort to involve the younger generation? You can get started.
For me, I really want to take the viewpoint that it needs to be encouraged, and I think both of them go hand in hand, being welcomed and being encouraged. I think if we don't encourage the young generation, ultimately they're not going to feel welcomed. Even I remember when I was starting out and being interested in space and coming to my first space event was IAC. People were always encouraging me, do this and do that, you should do that. And it's always so overwhelming and confusing when you don't know anybody, you don't know the structure, you don't know how to get involved. And it can be very overwhelming, and I would say even intimidating and scary. And if it wasn't for the people who welcomed me and encouraged me and, like you mentioned, mentored me, I would not be sitting here today. So I'm very grateful for, let's say, being pushed a little bit to be more proactive and to be a part of certain organizations and to do more, because this is ultimately what gives you that experience and what makes you have better connections with people. So with that being said, I think we need to be more proactive. We need to have better communication with students and young professionals. Really, when I was thinking about this question, I realized that sometimes we go to conferences and we fill the whole conference with meetings, and you go from meeting to meeting, from meeting to meeting, and ultimately you meet the same people. You never really meet, let's say, the people who are there for the first time, because you're not actually present at the event or the conference. So in a sense, sometimes we stay in little cliques and you don't actually get to meet the people who came to the conference and really wanted to network and meet you. So I think we really need to be mindful of this. And be a little bit more proactive in approaching people, because especially for, let's say, students or young professionals who are attending for the first time, it can be intimidating, let's say, approaching somebody and asking for advice or for mentorship.
Thank you.
Yes, I like to take on this question with a little example. Of course, I bet everybody here has attended to an IAC. And for myself, it's one of the best moments of the year. And the best part of IAC, I like to confess, is interacting with the emerging space leaders. So I actually encourage everybody to take some time to go and meet the 25 wonderful young people from all over the world that gather through generous scholarships from the IAF to enjoy their first Congress most times. And it's just impressive to see how driven, how passionate they are about space, and not only about space, but bringing them back to their countries. These people from Nepal, from South America, from Africa, are just there to take in, to soak in as much as they can. And this last year in Baku, I had the opportunity to, I always give myself some time to go and meet them, but this time I had the opportunity to also be there, helping them in the cross-cultural communication workshop on the Sunday. And I helped them do an elevator pitch. Right, because one thing is, of course, the scholarship welcomes them into the IAF, but then we also need to encourage them to break free a little bit from the comfort zone and go out there and make the most of the week. So the exercise we did with them was, if you go into the elevator and you see Clay, what would you tell him in 30 seconds? So then we all practiced, and then by the third day of the week, one of the ESLs from Nepal comes to me, Matthias, guess what? I went into the elevator and there was only Clay there. And I did my pitch just as we practiced. Thank you so much. I gave him one of the stickers that I brought. And he was so happy, and that is the encouragement that we need. Of course, I remember my first IAC, of course, and the GLEC when we did. It's to be welcomed and to be encouraged to be part of this community, also through Access and some other initiatives that we're working on. It's of course we get these 25 wonderful people coming from all over the world to IAC, but then sometimes most of them are not integrated into the IAF family, as I like to call it, but through Access, we're trying to invite them to be part of the regional subcommittees, to be more active. Now I'm happy to share with you that this is the first year that we will be hosting when I try to present papers of things we were doing in Latin America, there was not any symposium, and this year we're hosting the first E11 IAF symposium on emerging space ecosystems, where hopefully more and more of these emerging space leaders and other young professionals get to present their research and be involved in the IAF community.
That's such a good story. I love it. Yeah, I think the only thing I'd add is, like, obviously I'm firmly on the side of encouraging. Beyond encouraging, I'd even go so far as to say like mandating. Like there's, that consider if there's a committee of people and that committee of people are all over the age of 40, maybe there's a problem with that committee. Maybe there should be a young person on that committee. And then it is difficult because, as you say, there are structures, there's money, there's power, there's all of these things. And for someone to then say, oh, I'll give my position to someone less experienced and less good than me at this job, that's a big ask. So I think that's where the IAF can show leadership and kind of overcome some of that. And I think that that's a very good thing. The only thing I wanted to kind of challenge a bit was the point about experience. Experience is very important. But the question I always have is how much experience is required? Is 5 years, 10 years, 20, 30, 40, 50? And I think one of the statistics I keep hearing is, like, in 1969, the average age of people working in NASA mission control was 28. That was the average age, 28. And they managed to land stuff on the moon. I think, now, they may have got lucky. I'm not sure. But I think that, I'm getting some nods, but I think that when we think about experience, we've got to be realistic about what that means. Someone who's come up through SGAC probably has a decade of excellent experience by the time they're 30. So, we need to consider then that person could be in a position where they are capable of taking on greater responsibility than they might look like they are capable of. And so from the encouragement perspective, I think there's no one-size-fits-all approach, but having an eye to what talent is coming up through SGAC or through the IAF generally, and being proactive about saying, right, I'm going to mentor this person to take on my role, and I'm going to say that they're going to take my role in 2 years or they're not taking it at all, might be a good challenge for people.
There is just very little to be added because, it was basically all said. But what I would like to underline is when we're talking about having young people in leadership position, we need to think about what is exactly our goal with this, because this is not the goal. This is just a side effect. We don't want to have it just to have some nice statistics and to be able to say that we are inclusive. We want to do it to attract and, first of all, engage new talent. Because we all know that space community is still quite small. Let's be honest with ourselves. When we compare to different sectors around the world, space community is still pretty small. Most of the time we meet all the time the same people at the events, so we know that the talent is very limited still. But the space economy and the space ecosystems are growing. We need more talent. So in order to engage new talent, this is simply necessary. We need to encourage young generation to take up these roles.
The benefit of experience is a U curve, right? Like you said, there's a certain amount where there's beneficial, and then the benefits of more experience drops off over a while. Kind of my litmus test these days is, and this is not an age thing, is who uses ChatGPT almost on a daily basis. And the people I've been talking to have not touched it. They've been afraid of it. You know, it came out in, November of 22. I've been using it since December of 22, and almost on a daily basis. And I was talking to a bunch of people who here uses ChatGPT on a daily basis. 10% of the people? I mean, and that's not a young old thing, I don't think. I mean, I think you've got to get people with new ideas. You know, they're willing to try new ideas and be innovative. And that's not necessarily an age thing. I mean, some of that has to do with how much of a cosmopolitan worldview you have. But if I'm going to replace my managerial or leadership role with a young person that is just as got the same mindset as I do, I don't know if I'm benefiting anything. But that tends to be the natural way of things, is like, if it's different, it's wrong. I'm going to, replace myself with somebody who reminds me of myself, whether it's in gender, geography or whatever. So it gets really hard to do. You need forward-thinking young people as well. I'll take forward-thinking old people, right? It just, we want to be as innovative as possible.
Thank you. So the next question I have, it touches upon some of the items that you've mentioned, which is, mandating, as you mentioned. So how important is it to show good practices within the IAF with their latest decision at the Bureau concerning leadership of the Next Generation Committee taken up by younger professionals?
From my side, I think it's a good decision. Of course, this committee being about young professionals, it's all about. I think it's also for the young professionals that are welcomed into, as I was saying before, with the ESLs, into the IAF. It's good to have a younger person in charge of creating these activities, this committee that moves the opportunities so that they can be integrated into the community, also so that they see that there's potential in being part of the federation through different leadership opportunities. As I was saying before, like, it's the federation itself that trusted me when I was young, that has allowed me to be in the position where I am today. As well, my day job is my own company. I'm happy to represent the first and only new space company in Ecuador, and it's through the federation and the trust they have in that leadership since I was young that I've been able to develop more the company and the market. So I think it's a good decision. I also am in favor of other committees as well to encourage to have a young professional leadership, as we're seeing in the Bureau, as we're seeing in Access. It can also happen organically. So it's good to see both ways how more and more young people are getting into leadership positions in the IAF.
Yeah, I would agree. I think I know it was, well, I don't know. I heard it was fairly political as a decision, and I don't want to get involved in the politics of it. But I think logically it makes sense. The only thing I would say is that we've got to have somewhere for people to go when they age out of that committee, because by that point they'd be very experienced. And so if there's no kind of mandate anywhere else in the Bureau for the other committees that there must be someone of that kind of mid-age range, then you run the risk of having a bunch of very good young people come through and then drop off and disappear, while you have a more experienced, I would say older, group of people in positions of leadership who at some point will want to retire. And then you have a problem of who is there to take over at that point where they do want to retire. And if you don't have anyone in that middle zone who's being retained and continues to be involved and continues to be educated, then you end up in a situation where young people are kind of just thrown into it because there's nobody else. And that seems like a shame, because you could have a much more considered exchange of experience, mentoring, all of the things that we've been talking about. But that takes vision, it takes courage, it is probably more political than I could imagine. So but I think it's a really, really good first step, and will be very interesting to see what effect it has on producing those young people who are then available when they finish on that committee to move into other committees with that experience of how the systems work and ability to bring their skills to other areas of the IAF.
Yeah, I would certainly agree with everything that's being said. I think it's a fantastic step. I've definitely heard a variety of opinions on that, but for me, it's very logical to have somebody who represents the young generation be in those committees, or in that committee specifically, and really be the voice of the young generation. I think it's really important to have somebody in that position who realizes the current issues in order to really fix them and be able to do something about them. I really like what you mentioned, that ultimately it's about power. So really it comes the question, not if the young generation is ready, because I think even through SGAC, it's such a dynamic organization. You get so much experience. You're in different leadership positions. You organize so many things so quickly that I think ultimately you build yourself as a leader. So there are definitely people who are ready for these positions, but I think more so the question is if we're ready to allow the young people to take this position and allow them to lead us. An interesting thing for me with experience is that, yes, with a lot of experience, you know how to solve different and difficult situations better. But something that was mentioned at the panels at SGX was that with more experience, you become more cautious. You're less likely to take risks. You start protecting your reputation a bit more. You're very cautious of how your actions would affect different things. And I think if we really want innovation and new creative ideas and really want to implement different things, we need somebody who would not be so cautious of this and is more willing to take risks and put themselves out there, and ultimately has this creativity, because also with experience you're less likely, well, I think, to have creative decisions, purely because you'll base your decisions on what you've done in the past. So for me, this is an issue of power, and it's a bit of a power struggle, but I think it's ultimately the better decision to allow, let's say, younger people who would be taking risks and having more creative ideas.
Yeah, just to complement what was already said, I like the idea. So it's useful to have an entry point, a dedicated entry point for leadership position for young generation people in the federation. And I cannot imagine a better entry point than that, a dedicated committee that works with and for the young generation.
I think the IAF's done a fantastic job with promoting the young. I mean, it's clear that the younger generation is flourishing here. My committee, I was the benevolent dictator of my committee for about a dozen years, and then when we turned out, I was glad to turn the reins over. Now I didn't have to deal with all the administrivia and all that sort of stuff. But luckily we had a younger woman that took over, and so it's been absolutely fantastic. And but giving up a position of power in a volunteer organization is very different than doing it in your professional career. So there's a balance that goes on there. And it's a competitive process. So now we'd have 4 people vying for the same managerial or position of power within an organization, let's say ESA or NASA. And so it's the level of mentorship. I always go back to the Tom Lehrer joke of life is like a sewer. What you get out of it depends on what you put into it. And so, you've got to work toward it. And you've got to, show that you're enthusiastic and willing to learn and all that sort of stuff. So, and that's where, I've always been called Mr. Enthusiasm. So that's where, if I've gotten anywhere, which hasn't been far, it's been through a lot of enthusiasm, and that gets back to the Mark Twain quote. I've got plenty of both ignorance and enthusiasm.
Thank you so much. So with my last and final question, I ask that you answer it very quickly, because I'm sure most of you have experienced this. I have, which is essentially being a young person going into meetings or into an organization, and you trying to voice your opinion or present something, sometimes you feel dismissed. Have you experienced something like this, and how do you deal with it?
Oh, and personally, I'm very, like Ken was saying, I'm very, very confident as well, and sometimes ignorant. So I just go in and express myself. So I really haven't felt that this industry in particular shuts down young people. I like to say that I always tell people why I love so much work in space is that when you see the ISS and you see international collaboration, you really feel that on Earth as well. And it's the idea of 3G coming together. It's just as in the IAS, geography kind of diffuses, borders are a little bit unseen. Also, as well in this industry, I think that we're very welcoming to young people, and there's not that hard stop that I've seen in other industries when it comes to having young people be active participants and also taking up leadership roles in our community. So kudos to everybody that works in space for that. Yes.
I think, well, the answer is obviously yes. I walk into meetings and people are like, "What are you doing here?" It's just become very normal to me, and it isn't just in the IAF. I think, if anything, the IAF I have found to be the community is very good at learning who someone is and knowing who they are, and then you don't have to explain that, which is lovely. I guess in the rest of my career and kind of work, I've experienced that a lot of the time I'll be in a room and there's this expectation of, oh, who are we waiting for? And what they're waiting for is for someone older to walk in, and so often that older person is not coming because I'm the person in charge. So that's a bit of a problem, but it just is what it is. And a lot of the time, there's this whole like, oh, you've got to be confident, you've got to claim the space, you've got to do all of that. Sometimes I'm just like, that's exhausting. Like, I don't want to. I shouldn't have to. So a lot of the time I'll just, if I need to, sometimes just get someone who I work with who looks older and say, oh, can you just come to this meeting and just sit there? And they're like, yeah, no worries, that's fine. So sometimes you just work around these things by just, just kind of moving on and getting on with the work that you need to do in a pragmatic way. And I don't think there's anything wrong with doing that. Because it won't be this way forever. I'm sure after the stress of IAC 2025, no one will be questioning whether I'm too young. I'll look my age.
Yeah, I think certainly there has been times where I felt this. So when I became the executive director of SGAC, I was 23. And I think people are very surprised, and often I've experienced this. You go into a meeting and they're like, wait, what are you doing here? So you often find that I think people associate age with wisdom and, of course, experience. And when they see somebody young, they think they're not going to know what they're talking about, or they're not going to know how to handle the situation. And it's always nice to prove them wrong. But I also want to say that this is not everywhere. And I feel that especially for SGAC, this is very normal because everybody there is young, so it's nothing that is abnormal. And especially in other places such as the IAF, you feel that, or especially I felt very welcomed, and people were very enthusiastic when I took the role, very welcoming, giving advice or offering to help. So I think it depends on the situation, and you really get both. You're either welcomed or you get a little bit of bad looks. But I think in general we're moving towards a direction where we're being more open-minded towards young people, and I'm sure, as you said, that this will stop at a certain point.
Frankly speaking, I cannot recall really a moment where I would feel dismissed or my ideas would feel dismissed. So of course, when you meet a person for the first time, your age is part of the first impression you make, so obviously it somehow fits in the whole puzzle that the person is forming in their head when they see you for the first time. But I cannot really say I felt dismissed. In case that would happen, I might just consider shaving less and then might do the trick. But where I would say that this was somehow more vivid is the other G that I represent, and that's the geography one, because I had many cases where I felt that this might be the barrier sometimes, because the unknown is of course something that people tend to be afraid of or not be really willing to explore. So in many cases there were situations that, and it's not just, for example, in case of Slovakia, but the partners from basically whole Central Europe that has this experience in the past, that it wasn't always very easy to get somehow in discussion or in the value chain, in the partnerships with the well-established players. And well, this basically the same discussion over and over again. It's not always easy to be the newcomer, but it takes the mutual respect, it takes the mutual will and willingness to, from the side of the experienced one, to be open to new ideas, to be open to new possibilities of collaboration, and from the side of the newcomer, to be willing to bring something extra to the table, to run extra mile, to bring some new added value that will benefit all.
Number one, my first observation is the two males didn't feel dismissed, but the two females did, number one. And I'm going to...
3 females.
Yeah, 3 females, there you go. But then I'll say that to me, it's always been a thing of ideas, you know, and for me, my ideas tend to be a little bit like in Krau, you know, I tend to be, I don't want to say contrarian, but I like to look at multiple perspectives, and in doing that, you tend to go outside the norm, and so the farther you get away from the standard deviation, you know, the more I think my ideas have been dismissed. But that's okay, you know, you just have to deal with it. But again, male-female disparity, I think, is pretty obvious.
For sure, that's what I was going to say, is that all the women here felt were definitely dismissed at some point for being young and for being a woman, but the males not necessarily. So that's something that says something. So thank you so much for your insights. What we have learned today is that you must encourage young people to participate and take on leadership roles, that you have to set a mandate or a push for it, as well as having mentorships, and that experience, there is a cutoff there. You know, you don't really need like 1,000 years of experience, but you do need some experience, and you need someone willing to try new things and to be open to new technologies and new ways of thinking. Thank you so much for that insight. Thank you all for listening.
Thank you very much, Mishaal, for the great moderation, and a big thanks to all the speakers. I think we all got very inspiring ideas from those who already have taken up leadership roles, and also from Ken, who himself says that he was ready to let go with the reins. Thanks a lot to you for being with us this morning. Again, if you have any of your comments or remarks or suggestions, please feel free to put them in the box here at the exit. And other than that, please enjoy the rest of the breakfast. Have excellent meetings today, and I look forward to seeing you here again at 1 o'clock for our IDEA 3G Diversity Lunch, where we'll continue to talk about our diversity achievements. Thank you very much.